Hey everybody, welcome in. It's another episode of a Nichols Worth right here on however you're listening. We got multi-streams going right here. I'm your host, Keaton Nichols, alongside that guy. He's Jovan Alford, show contributor and co-host as well. Welcome to the program, Jovan.
Glad to be back on. We're back at it again. Another week talking everything in the world of news and politics, which is an ever changing landscape as we get
That it
further
is.
away from looking at the microcosm of the election and starting to look forward to what the next steps. Not only for the rest of this year, but 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road.
Absolutely. A lot of work to do. A lot of work to do. So that's going to be an important part of how we look at what's next. Not just focusing in on the election again and the things that went wrong and all these things for either sort of candidate, but now we're sort of dissecting what we do next with this energy. There's a lot to talk about here on the show. Before we get started in the conversation, just a reminder: this is a live show. Thank you for those that are able to tune in live on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram as well. We're working every week on trying to get more ways that you guys can watch the live show and participate as much as possible, because a lot of this conversation needs to be fueled by the people. The people are very important in this conversation. So we appreciate and we welcome all comments, questions, and things like that. This is going to be a big one for you guys to respond to as well, because we're talking independent candidates, third party candidates today on the show in the wake of an election that went absolutely bonkers, arguably for both parties. It went very well for the individual known as Donald Trump, of course, and the political power of the Republicans we know expanded. But what does that really mean for an individual person? What does that mean for you and I, the average voter, in the next couple of years, and how we decide to lean politically? We'll talk about that tonight on the show. So your participation is welcome. Please leave a comment. However you are listening, you can leave a comment. You do get bonus points for commenting on the show. That's one of the cool things that we do here as well. So yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to it for sure. Make sure you participate in the conversation. We just went live on Instagram, by the way, for those that are looking for that link. The Instagram link just went live. Apparently, you have to click an extra button here, Jovan. We're still learning our production techniques as well. So make sure you get in on the conversation. Before we dive into the third party conversation, the news this week, if you will, in the highest realm of politics, seem to follow the incumbent president Donald Trump and how he anticipates to form his cabinet, which for those that aren't necessarily familiar with this, these are going to be the people that essentially head the departments in government at a macro level, like at a big level, that are going to be overseeing some of the changes, if you will, some of the things that are going to be going on in the country from a legislative perspective, but kind of bigger picture kind of things for those that are
Mm-hmm.
unfamiliar with what a cabinet does and kind of their significance in this whole thing. Jovan, again, for those that aren't necessarily familiar, what did these picks this week that Donald Trump made for these cabinet positions, what did they kind of say to you? Because some of them were most of them, I would argue, are very unusual choices. How is that significant moving forward, in your opinion?
I mean, like you said, some of them were unusual. A lot of them, I think we could say that they were very not straight to the point. I think the people that he chose, it wasn't a surprise, right?
Yeah.
Because these people were kind of already hanging in his realm. Now, some of the people that he nominated, will they get through? That's the bigger, question about it, right? I don't think no one was surprised to, see Marco Rubio and Tulsi Gabbard, in his cabinet because they were around during the campaign. Now, should Marco Rubio be Secretary of State or should Tulsi Gabbard be Director of National Intelligence? Given her situation, I don't. That's a whole another conversation for a whole another day for a lot of these guys. But I think it shows he really, he really kept his circle tight in a way of he made sure that his loyalists were with him at the end of the day. Like he
Hmm.
stuck to his loyalists, right? Like we mentioned, the Rubios, the Matt Gates, who's up for Attorney General, even though he has some very serious allegations
Yeah.
against him. Robert F. Kennedy as his health and Human Services Secretary. And we know RFK pretty much sold his position in the race to try to get on with one of the two, candidates. You got
Sold
Elise
himself as
Stefanik,
the highest bidder.
right, to the highest bidder to both, candidates. So it kind of shows where, he's at. You got Elise Stefanik, who's been in the news, for some of her comments and commentary. Pete Hegseth, Fox News, war veteran, weekend host on Fox News, but he's got some stuff, with him. Tom Homan, the borders are, even though they was criticizing Kamala for being a borders are, he has the borders are,
Which isn't
in
a thing,
his
by the way.
right.
Borders
It's
are is
not a thing.
It's not an
It's not a
official
thing.
position in government, in case anyone was wondering.
No, it's not. It's not. So you got him. You got Doug Burgum, who I think was in the Republican primary for a certain amount of time. A rich dude, let's just say that, very rich dude. So
a lot of like anti-politics people here. Like there are some traditions. You mentioned Matt Gaetz and Marco Rubio, Tulsi Gabbard. People that have served in Congress in one way, shape, or form or another. But a lot of these people, you had mentioned Pete Hegseth. This was somebody that I was completely unfamiliar with, who has been nominated to be Secretary of Defense. And if that sounds like an important position, that's because it is. It is very important. Pete Hegseth, from what I can tell, is a dude that works for Fox News, like the media outlet. Like, you could kind of dissect his career further than that. As you mentioned, he served in the military, but what is this? A lot of it said to me that loyalty is certainly a lot more important to Donald Trump than prior record or, being a part of some sort of system that, people have known and grown to trust. Like, this cabinet said to me, I'm going to do whatever I want by nominating the people who are probably going to question and say no to me the least. I'm not saying that based on speculation. I'm saying that based upon what Donald Trump himself has said, that, what his strategy is. That's basically what he wants to do here. What a lot of people don't realize about Trump's leadership style, and I use that term very loosely here, but what people don't realize about his style of leadership is that he performs more as a boss than a leader and an example, if you will.
Right.
His entire career, whether you want to focus on the idea that he was given a lot of his wealth, and by a lot I mean all of it, from the start, he never had to be a worker that kind of had to push his way up through different classes, economic classes and things like that. So the positions of power that Donald Trump has held in the past have always been as the boss. Like, he's just placed at the top, and then he can tell other people what to do. This cabinet very much so reflects that idea that he's very much so selecting people who are most likely to do what he wants to do. He, as the president, doesn't actually have as much power as many people think as an individual. But by surrounding himself with a cabinet of people that are just pretty much going to do whatever he says anyway, you virtually kind of create an environment like that in government. And again, this is what people voted for. They may not have realized the impact and the significance of what this in totality means for every aspect of this, but this is one of the things that we'll keep an eye on and monitor in the future, how this cabinet plays out. The first time around, when he had his pick of the litter, he could choose and select whatever a group of people that he wanted around him. He ended up firing a bunch of people, Jovan. The turnover rate was insane. How many people personally that he selected and that he chose that he ended up firing, and many of those people that he fired back during his first presidential campaign were fired because they didn't do what he wanted them to do. Eventually they said, "Hey, I have a job to do here. I have a post to protect. I need to, to protect the post." And Donald Trump said, "Fine, you're out of here." And so wondering this time around as he selects these people. If it sounds weird, these selections sound weird to you, maybe it's because these people aren't a part of the traditional system of things that will work hard to protect the way that things are, but rather protect the way that Donald Trump is.
Yeah, no, when you were saying that, like, people that he's fired in the past, I remember from the first administration he fired Rex Tillerson and replaced him with Pompeo, the CIA, for like.
And let's not forget Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions, longtime senator in Alabama, who had his political end of his political career pretty much decimated by all the things that
and he
that
got placed
Trump
by and
embroiled
he got
him
placed by
into.
Bill Barr, right?
Yeah, who right now,
Yeah.
if you ask Bill Barr how he feels about Donald Trump, you'd get some interesting comments too. So, like a lot of this, it's wait and see, but this is the
Hmm.
Trump style of things that we have come to expect. That this doesn't surprise me that he has picked a cabinet full of people that don't really look like political appointees, so much as they look like people that have just been nice to Trump and who haven't challenged any of the conflicting messages
Right.
that have come out of the Trump campaign so far. So that's just my 2 cents on it as well. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about the cabinet. I'm sure you can flip to any media source around for extended coverage on this kind of thing. Instead, we're going to get back to the people. Dylan comments in on Facebook and says, some people have valid backgrounds, talking about Trump's
Very true.
cabinet here. Some people have valid backgrounds. Rubio is decent. Some people, though, like the Fox News host, are terrible choices. That's Pete Hegseth, who we just mentioned. However, the people that don't have the background won't be allowed through. And this is an interesting topic here before we move on, though, because it is a referendum more so on Republicans, Jovan, here for this next part that Dylan mentions here, because we kind of know how the Democrats are going to vote. They're just going to be like, no, we don't want any of these people. That's understandable. And likely, some of these picks are
Right.
going to get some Democrat support, and that's
yeah.
the way that it's supposed to be.
Right.
But for those unfamiliar with how this process works, these people are nominated to be in Trump's cabinet. They still have to be approved by Congress in order for them to fulfill these positions. Congress right now, and this is going to be a concept that we're going to bring up many, many times in the next several years, I feel like, in conversations. Congress is controlled almost entirely by Republicans right now. So, as these approvals go through, if they go through, it goes through with a Republican stamp that says, hey, we did this. We pushed these people
Right.
through. Any failures from this administration and these people in this administration should be applied to the idea that this was a green light that was set to green by the Republicans here. And to your point right there about hopefully the ones with the troublesome backgrounds won't be allowed through. If they are allowed through, which they probably will,
Right.
this is not going to be blood that is on the hands, if you will, of Democrats here. A small silver lining for Democrats, maybe moving forward, maybe they can build momentum off of that, perhaps. But that is a referendum there that is on it is the fault rather of the Republicans. If something goes wrong with this process, it's the fault of the Republicans. They have to live with that. So choices are choices. It is what it is. We're talking all different types of news and current events. If you want in on the conversation like Dylan just did, you can get in as well.
He gets
However
points.
you're listening right now, you can receive points for commenting in. You receive even more points if you share the link, the show link, and let us know about it with a friend or whoever. We don't care. You don't have to be your friend. Just share it. And you can get points just like Dylan did. So make sure you check it out. The other thing I wanted to kind of talk about too, you had mentioned with RFK kind of this, sort of allure and this attraction to some of his policies, but overall putting a person like this that kind of represents, in a sense, kind of the fringe of the fringe of a particular political belief now has charge, if you will, about how all Americans, not how, rather, I don't want to be too dramatic here, but
Right.
has a significant stake in, the role that health plays for all Americans in the next 4 years. That is Robert F. Kennedy. Was he the third one in line here, I guess? Or I'm sorry, Junior, the second one in line here. But many, many things have been made about RFK. During the election, Jovan, it was interesting because he was garnering a lot of attention from people that felt like he had some good one-liners. I feel like he made some good, like, this should be this way,
He had some punchlines.
America should, stop doing this and do more of that. He does have a lot of those one-liners which are appealing in the short sense, right? Do I have to understand everything that RFK is about in order to appreciate, if you will, what he's saying? No, I don't have to, especially if I'm receiving those messages in little kind of bits and pieces that are kind of between these two big messages from Democrats and Republicans blowing up your phone every 2 seconds during the election, right? With all these messages. No, you need to vote this way because the Republicans are evil. No, 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 no. You need to vote this way because the Democrats will literally kill you. Like these big messages, I think people almost cartoonishly kind of let them go in one ear and then boom, right
Out
out
the
the
other.
other because they just sound ridiculous at this point. So when there's a third party candidate that can come up with catchy one liners like this, it gains a lot of attention. Now, eventually, RFK ends up slothing over to the Donald Trump side of things. And the reason why I say sloth is because he offered himself as the highest bidder here. He did not come in supporting Donald Trump and everything that he was about, essentially as a third party candidate, knowing he was going to lose, said, hey, let me lend my support to one candidate or the other, and then again offered himself as the highest bidder. He offered himself to Kamala Harris's camp. Kamala Harris said no. Donald Trump said, sure, we'll take you. And what happens, happens. Now, I'm not saying that that was the tilting swing here, but as you mentioned before in the pre-show, Jovan, this election ended up being a lot closer than a lot of people ended up realizing in terms of the popular vote. And maybe, that support maybe lent to something with Donald Trump winning, similar to a Ralph Nader in 2000 or, some of these other, what you mentioned, Gary Johnson in
Gary Johnson
2016
in 2016.
and things like that, right? Affecting the race like that. The question I want to ask to the people out there listening right now is there a third party candidate or an independent candidate that appeals to you? And if so, I'd love to know why in the comments. Whoever that person is, let me know. If you don't know too much about the person, that's fine too. We're just fielding opinions here about if there's a person other than a Republican or a Democrat that appeals to you. Let us know in the comments. This pick right here, though, with RFK and this conversation about a third party is a very interesting one to me because I have fundamentally believed that a third party in the environment where there are two dominant parties is kind of a folly a
Right.
bit, right? Like it's not something that has real momentum because there's real corporate structure behind these two parties that we have and that exist now. But Jovan, you looked up some numbers on this most recent election, which we again mentioned have been very tight. And the third party candidates in this most recent election, many of whom I didn't even know about until I looked at tonight. I'm going to be honest with you. I was like, what, who are these people? Like, what is going on? They ended up garnering some significant numbers, but there ended up being a lot more of them than I originally intended. And they ended up being a lot loonier than I anticipated.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, outside of the known, the known candidates of, RFK and the Jill Stein Butch Ware ticket for the Green Party, right? Like you said, when we started to do further deep down research and even just looking back at some of the ballots, right, of seeing guys like Cornel West, who independent, but some ballots came down as I think We the People, no, whether We the People or the Justice Party and Unity
like
Party,
that, yeah.
like
Unity
he came down,
Citizens,
yeah.
yeah.
But we also saw, someone like a Chase Oliver from the Libertarian Party who got about 636,000 votes, which doesn't seem like a lot, but still very noticeable that he was able to garner some, momentum from the Libertarian side. But then as we go kind of further down into the rabbit hole of third party voting, we see other candidates that was also on some ballots. And I think that's also thing we got to realize too, that for these third parties, not everybody's on every state's ballot, so that's why the numbers are a little bit
a little bit
up
skewed
and down,
here,
a little skewed here. But then we also had, outside of the Jill Stein, Robert F. Kennedy, Chase Oliver, those are like your top three go-getters for third party. You had, after that, you had Claudia De La Cruz from the Socialism and Liberation Party, who only had 146,000 votes. And then you had Cornel West, who had 74,000 votes. And then as you get kind of deeper further down as a rabbit hole, we have guys like Randall Terry from the Constitution Party. If you haven't seen Randall Terry, look him up for your own research. But I would say viewers discussion is advised with just his like takes and views, depending on whatever side you're on, right? 41,000 votes. You got Peter Sonsky from the American Solidarity Party, 30,000 votes. Another independent voter, 28,000. Then you had Joel Soskin Joe Skuskin, excuse me, from the another Constitution Party, but for the factions, I guess.
That's crazy.
12,000 votes. So there was a lot of
Crazy.
different factions and things that were within the third party outside of what everybody was focusing on, which was the two-party system of Democrat Republican.
Right. And this is the issue with the third party, the quote unquote third party conversation, which I think has a big opportunity. In the next couple of years, I think that they have a big opportunity, and I'm not talking about any one of these individual parties, though. This is the problem. I mean, you just rattled off what nine candidates or so, that ran in this election, splitting. You know, if we totaled them, I don't have the calculator in front of me.
You're basically splitting like 1% of a percent, almost.
You're splitting. Let's say like, okay, 1.4. You know, I do numbers in my other life here. About 2.5. Let's call it about 2 to 2.5 million votes that these 9 candidates just basically split in effect. That has zero impact. I don't know what is that as the overall percentage of the vote. Maybe a percentage, maybe 0.5%, whatever. They collectively don't necessarily have any power, but you listen and you don't recognize any of these names because these people appeal to a very, very small portion of the population. These parties only appeal to a small portion. It's hard to gain momentum, essentially, whenever your appeal is to a percentage of one side of the political lean in this country. Parties, to me, in my estimation, are not the answer. An additional party, rather, is not the answer. We took an Instagram poll, a very informal Instagram poll of just like people that I literally know. So far on that poll, I asked, would you vote third party in the next election? So far, 75% of the people voted no, they would not. 25% of the people said, I don't know enough information necessarily to answer, which is an answer I really appreciate, by the way.
Right.
Nobody voted yes so far in our very, very informal poll. Let me know how you feel about that. I'm sure there are a few. So this is just kind of a microcosm example again of what we talked about with these parties not having a whole lot of momentum. The idea of another party popping up is not a very appealing issue. It's the people that want representation. They want better representation. I don't think that they want another choice of something that isn't exactly for them either, right? Like if I buy one TV from a major company and I'm comparing that against another TV from a major company, just because a third company has popped up doesn't mean that TV is going to be better. That is a corporate sort of idea. And I have long argued that the two major political parties operate like businesses. They operate like major companies, like a Walmart or like a big bank or something, or a Target. Like Walmart and Target going at each other. You can come up with all different types of reasons why one of those super centers is better than the other, or why the other one sucks, or whatever else like that. But at the end of the day, they're making money from everybody that comes into the door, right? So the political parties have mirrored that sort of attitude for many, many years in this country. Not always, but I think that they've mirrored that attitude now that we see that messaging is probably a whole lot more important than policy. We said that in the pre-show, Jovan, and I wanted to see what you guys thought about that. But messaging today rather is a whole lot more significant to the political process than policy is. We saw that in this most recent election. A part of the reason why Donald Trump is not very heavy on his policy agenda is in part because he doesn't really have a lot of policies, but also what he represents. Yeah, the messaging is strong against this idea that what he represents isn't exactly Republican heavy either. Republicans vote for him, certainly, but the message isn't very Republican heavy either. It was a very anti-establishment sort of message that a lot of people connected into through the messaging, right? They were like, we don't want whatever's going on. We don't know what he's going to create in this space, but we don't want whatever has been going on. That is tremendous. That is a tremendous opportunity for a third party concept, if you will, to enter the conversation, but not as a party. I think both these parties are cooked, Jovan. Both of them are cooked.
Yeah, and I think we kind of saw that just based off of how the popular vote kind of maneuvered itself in the end all be all. Obviously, Trump had about 76 million of the popular vote, which is a little bit higher than what he was getting in 2020 and 2016. I think he was still 73, 74, 76. So he's still around the same area. But when you look, and even Harris did well when the final vote total came at 73, but there wasn't no huge move. Obviously, was down from Biden, but there wasn't no huge gain for Donald Trump and the Republicans on that side. So I think, like you said, that is where people are kind of annoyed at the two-party system and looking for something new, looking for a message or a vision of change that speaks to them, right? I think this is where it leads to people, like you said during the pre-show, like people being selfish with their vote, saying, I'm voting based off of my needs and my wants, right? Not what my neighbor or me thinking about the greater good. I'm thinking about myself and my family and how they are affected by these things. So if I vote for Trump, then so be it. If I vote for a third party, then so be it.
Right, right. And I think that there's a coalition of voters. I mean, just having casual conversations about this thing, again, not taking any official polls or anything on this, but just talking to people that are around, right? Talking to what is your reaction to this election? I don't know if we mentioned this on the show last week, but I do believe that there's a hidden coalition of non-MAGA Trump voters, and I'll explain what that means in a second, but non-MAGA Trump voters and also voters that stayed home or voted third party, which statistically ends up being just as effective or ineffective, I guess, in this election. That combination of those two groups of voters alone, they could be swept up by another idea in the next couple of years. And I don't know if that takes form in the form of a party, as an individual, or as a movement, a political movement. But there's energy between those two groups of voters. There are a lot of people that voted for Donald Trump that are not MAGA loyalists. They are not people who hang on Donald Trump's every word as fact and as truth and as this wonderful, amazing thing. They voted for him for a bevy of other reasons or other things that could be put on the table. Whether or not you consider that Donald Trump is not going to be anything politically after the next 4 years, he can't run anymore after the next 4 years, or just the idea that maybe people will be over this whole concept by then, Donald Trump is not going to be a significant political figure after the next 4 years. So what then fills in that void in that space for a lot of the people that maybe cast a vote for him as a means of change, as a way of going in a different direction, but also, aren't necessarily in love with whatever it is that the Republicans are offering after that. There is, I think, an opportunity right there. I'd love to hear what people think, by the way, of what those opportunities could be as well.
Yeah, no, and I think what you said about like how there is this pocket for, like you said, the people that are voting for third party, and also the Republicans that aren't MAGA. I think, like you said, there is that pocket, and obviously the Democrats try to reach into that pocket by saying like, "Hey, look, we have Liz Cheney, campaigning with Harris, or you have guys like Adam Kinzinger, like speaking out, like." You have those type of Republicans.
These are Republicans, typically Republicans that are now teaming up with Democrats, for the sake of the
campaign. And I think there are more people like that are out there for there, and obviously that plan of action for the Democrats didn't work out. Right? They couldn't. Right. They thought reaching over to the other side and trying to work in unity, or try to work in unity to kind of say like, hey, we'll take you on this side, to help do X, Y, and Z. It never kind of figured itself out. Meanwhile, the people that are voting independent or third party, they feel as if, well, no one's thinking about us. Like, we're just sitting here.
It's like to use your earlier example of Walmart and Target. If Walmart and Target teamed up together to try and appeal to to shoppers that didn't like big shopping centers, how would that look? Like Walmart and Target teaming up to target, shoppers at like small stores and smaller operations? That doesn't make sense, right? And so that was one of the things I looked at during the course of the campaign. Is like Democrats felt that was their best option. Maybe we can team up politically. We can team up together. But you used a term in the pre-show as well, Jovan, that was pretty cool, and I think that is going to become significant, which is that politics is going to become less gang affiliated moving
Yeah.
into the future. It's going to become less gang. There's a lot of politics right now that is based in loyalty. Like if you are a liberal, if you are on the left, you vote Democrat. If you are a part of these, many groups that Democrats have to keep track of these days,
Right.
you call yourself a Democrat and you're or a liberal on the left. And the opposite happens if you're on the right. If you're more conservative, if you more believe in more conservative ideals, then you're typically on the right. And that has been the sort of wide net that has captured the loyalty of different groups of voters. Like when we talk about African American voters all the time, every election
Hmm.
cycle, African American voters become this issue because many people argue that, look, Democrats are using the African American vote here. They're just saying, hey, look, we're the people for you. We're not going to necessarily do anything for you, but we're the people for you, and you need to vote this way. That is a loyalty thing. That is a loyalty conversation, something that
Right.
really skews the effectiveness of politics if people are just going to lean one way because you're supposed to go that way anyway. How is that making anything better? This conversation has re-entered the political arena. I don't know, probably a million times. Just in the last 4 or 5 presidential election cycles. So that alone, I think, sort of shows that the loyalty factor with these two parties has grown tiresome. It has grown worn out. This whole idea of should we be loyal to the left or loyal to the right? That's where there's an opportunity here politically, and that may mean that these political parties have to come up off of that idea that, hey, you're with us because gang. You're a Democrat because that's the gang to go. Like we represent the team that you want to be on, right? Almost like a
Right.
sporting event.
Right.
Kind of feels like sporty. And the Republicans are kind of trying to do the same thing. Donald Trump didn't run on any of that, and he seemed to appeal the most to the to the voters here by a hair here, but he did seem to appeal to the majority of significant voters in those swing states.
Yeah, he did. Like you said, he didn't necessarily like come off as Republican, right? He's under the Republican ticket, but he created his own movement, right? He created his own movement, which is the Make America Great Again movement. Like he's created this
Sure.
movement that started in 2016 that has carried over and has continued to grow and continue to, get big to the point where, like you said, now there's another faction that has now entered the conversation to where now even Republicans have to think about how do they maneuver? Like, how do you, like you said, do you go towards, hey, we're Republicans, like you come vote for us, or do you go towards we got to try to what's
Yeah.
going to be the messaging for everybody? And like you said, I think that's the thing where politics, and I think we see it now just on social media and different intermediate and different, independent media platforms. Like just a lot of people are just, talking about things that affect them, and it's not so much heavily like I'm super liberal. Like obviously there are some like super liberal like platforms, things like that are like, super liberal, that's where they at. And then there's super
YouTube
right wing.
sites or
Right.
TikTok accounts that you might
Yeah,
follow
there's
or
right.
yeah.
But there's, like you said, I think it is gonna be a point, come to a point where people are voting straight off of not so much party, but more so the politics and the
Yeah.
policies
Yeah.
that affect me and my family and my friends going forward.
Right. And you had mentioned something about media too. We're taking your comments right now on this issue. Dylan actually commented in again. I wanted to bring that up before we started. Parties are a major issue. Why can't we be humans instead of Democrats, Republicans, libertarians? It separates people more, which kind of gives credence to those numbers that we had just brought up too about like how these votes are doing more to split these political parties than they are to support a particular idea that a lot of
Yeah,
people like,
you're
and
creating
that's a
teams.
major problem. Yeah, you're
Yeah, you're
creating more
creating teams.
separation. Yeah,
You're
more
you're you're
dividers.
you're gamifying politics.
Yeah,
Like
so
I hate when
making people pick and choose
right.
exactly which side they want to be on instead of saying, is there a policy that works for me? I don't care who came up with it, this guy or that guy or that gal or this
Hmm.
gal. It doesn't matter. Does it work for me, or are we turning ourselves into an actual better business, a better country rather, instead of just offering another business option? One of the things that I think is significant in this conversation is the way that we process news and information. It ended up becoming a big part of, I would argue, the 2016, 2020, and 2024 elections.
Hmm.
Information or misinformation, how that was handled, how people viewed it as well. It said to me that there has been a weakening of traditional media sources, the kind of stuff that you and I went to school for, Jovan. in the great city of Philadelphia, as it were. The thing is, like, these concepts, these core concepts of media have been weakened tremendously over the last 8 years, large in part because of the negative messaging that we've seen from the most popular Republican candidate, Donald Trump, or Republican figure, rather, Donald Trump, and partly because I think people have grown to sort of trust other forms of media, to your
Hmm.
point about like the YouTube pages and like this one. Hey, and the TikToks and the Instagrams and the Facebook
The
posts
Twitters
and
and
the X's and the Twitters and things like that. These are things that people have grown to rely on as a source of media a lot
hmm
more than traditional media sources.
hmm
I have continually brought up the concept that this is a little bit of an issue. It's actually not a little bit, a major issue, because while there are a lot of positives in independent media, traditional terrestrial media, sort of serves an important role in how we process and how we look at information. So people have moved away from that and chosen to follow perhaps the algorithms or their own desire to hear news and to seek out news that sounds and feels more appealing to
beneficial to
them
them.
than
Yes.
official than the actual record of account, which typically these news sources, they lean, but typically these news sources stick to that official record of account. And now people are moving away from that from a media perspective. It's weakened media. Coming from two media individuals, I know that you could at least partially agree in this. The role of media has been weakened so much in the last 8 years that it welcomes and opens up this idea that people aren't going to have these same political loyalties moving forward that are
Yeah, no.
oftentimes generated by the media.
Yeah, no. And I think that's where we kind of saw this digital divide just in these two campaigns, right? Trump didn't really lean on the network television. I think we talked about this before in last week's show, right? He didn't depend on the 60 Minutes or, obviously he goes on Fox News all the time, but that's not nothing like different, right? He didn't go on the 60 Minutes. He didn't go on the ABCs outside of the debate. He didn't go on CBS, like
Yeah,
NBC. He didn't do none of that stuff,
completely
right?
avoided the mainstream circuit
Right.
of media.
Where did he go? Like he went to like what the OANs were broadcasting and stuff. He hit the
Hmm.
podcast scene really hard, right? The Rogans, the Andrew Schultz's, the Theo Vaughn podcast. Like
Yeah,
they made a concerted effort to hit digital because they know this is where people are siphoning their information from. It's not from like a news source. They feel some people get their news and commentary and information from podcasts. So he
right.
feel like Joe Rogan has him on. We're probably going to learn something from him. And Harris and them, they waited too late to get into the digital realm. They tried to dip their foot in the both, and like
Yeah.
we're still going to hit the 60 Minutes. We're going to do the interview, with on CNN with Dana Bash. We're going to do the town halls. We're going to be on the View. Like we're doing all those things, but then we're also going to do, the Caller Daddy podcast, Club Shay Shay,
Hmm.
all the smoke. But they were trying to do both, right? Howard Stern, 20 years ago,
Sure.
it worked, but Howard Stern now doesn't because, as we've talked about before, the electorate is getting younger too. So
Hmm.
when the electorate is getting younger, how are they getting reached? They're getting reached through social media. They're getting reached through their phone. They're getting
Yep.
reached through TikTok clips. Even though she probably had a very solid TikTok platform,
She
with
did.
the
Yeah.
Kamala HQ account, but it wasn't enough that made a dent from what the media machine that was being pushed digitally. It didn't help her, and they were able to Trump's credit and people in his team, they were able to override that
Right.
and just continue that momentum.
Right. And that was something that, again, mainstream media thought, hey, this is an obvious aberration for Donald Trump to behave this way or to say these things. That was the wild thing. There were so many, things that major media captured and said, look at this, this is crazy. Like, look at what he's saying at his rallies. But it's almost like kind of like entertainment for them.
Yeah,
It was
they made it as a joke. Meanwhile, when in the summer when it was Joe Biden looking on that debate stage, now we're spending like 3-4 days like hammering it on until now the big media networks and newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post are all on
hmm
the same accord of like, is he gonna be gone? Should they do this? Is it time for them to step down? There wasn't the same emphasis and detail to what was
Yeah.
happening on there. Like you said, almost treating it like a entertainment platform. Like, oh, did you see what he said at the rally?
Did you hear
Did
the
you see,
latest thing that Trump said? You know,
right?
yeah,
Did you see him? Did you see him get into the garbage truck? Like it
yeah.
was.
Yeah, I mean,
It was
he
played. It
became the
was played
news
around.
in
Right.
many ways, and media has been, I think, chasing something that they lost sight on a number of years ago when the digital, sort of revolution in news really started to take effect. Many news outlets were already behind the eight ball. They hadn't adopted new media forms until it was too late, and so I still feel like media outlets today with all your paywalls, and you go to a news site today and you're just inundated with ads and
Mm-hmm.
all different types of things like that. People don't like that kind of stuff anymore, and it's
No.
because news media sites are trying to play catch up, and the way
Yes.
that they play catch up right now is attaching themselves to whatever's hot, whatever's the showy and the shiny kind of thing. That's how they generate views, that's how they generate money and things like that. So again, these are big corporate forms of media that are attaching themselves to big corporate brands of politics known as Democrats
That's what
and
we're going with them.
Republicans. People aren't connecting with that anymore. They're not feeling that anymore. And so as
Which
they've pulled away from one entity, they actually end up pulling away from both in my estimation and looking for something else on the ticket right now.
right, which is where you would think independent parties, the Green, Libertarian, Constitution, you know, those type of parties, or the what's the other party?
No,
The Andrew Yang party. What was that
the
party called?
Forward Party
Yeah,
or something like that.
the forward
Yeah.
party. Like these are where you would think that these parties were kind of jump right into the fray and kind of start that conversation, because for those parties to be successful in the long term, they have to do the groundwork now. They can't
Right.
come around every 4 years and think
Right.
that they're
Right.
going to make
Major key.
they think that they're going to make change. How many times people are going to sit around and see Jill Stein on a ticket with someone else and she's not making any change for the Green Party? I'm sorry, I don't speak for the Green Party, but let's be honest, they the Green Party did was at its peak really back in 2000 with Ralph Nader,
Probably,
and
yeah. It's
when it
probably
was
their biggest run.
when it got 2.7% of the vote in 2000. But outside of that, it's kind of was going down, dwindling. Obviously, Jill Stein got it back in 2016 with 1.1% of the vote, but then turn around this year, Stein and Ware 0.5% of the vote. 2020, they had a new ticket in Holly Hawkins and Angela Walker 0.3. So
Didn't do anything.
it didn't do anything. So I think for those third parties to be successful, like I said, Green, Libertarian, forward party, like you have to start the groundwork now. You have to put the people, you have to reach the people on a local and state level before you can think about let's pushing this message
Yeah.
across, in a presidential election where you don't really stand, let's be real, you don't stand a chance.
They're trying to copy the business model of the bigger parties. That's a part of this problem too. Is these third parties are oftentimes branding themselves as something that's different when really they're just a smaller and less politically significant version of the two major parties. They're trying to do the same thing, right? Like, and idealistically, the Green Party, if they are to succeed here, would fill Congress and the presidency and everything else with Green Party members, right? And then you would have a different gang, if you will, in control of what's going on, or in the majority of the control of what's going on. That is idealistically what these parties want, is more political power. And the way that you gain more political power within this game, the way that it's currently set up, is by behaving like the two biggest actors in the production, which are the Democrats and the Republicans. And in many ways, they're trying to push a different message, but taking the same road to get there, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and it's not feasible because of the two, conglomerates. They have the money, they have the political power,
and the
they have
influence, yeah.
everything, the influence, they have everything. So Green Party cannot compete on the same level as Democrat Republican Party. Libertarians can't do it. The Constitution Party can't do it. It reminds me of the analogy I'm thinking of here, it's almost like for people that collect sports cards, right? You have
Uh-huh.
the Panini and the Tops, the two big number one and number two. Don't matter if it's football, basketball, baseball, like those are the two. But
Hmm.
then you have the unlicensed groups, the Leafs and the Wild Card, right? They are kind of they want to be on that level, but they can't get there yet, right? So the
Hmm.
idea is for them start small. Let's try to get licensed or unlicensed, but maybe people like our stuff. People are liking our stuff
Right.
to the point now where Tops is saying, "Hey, like we're going to start doing unlicensed stuff," right? But it took time and years for people to be like, you know what? Instead of spending $500 on like this baseball hobby box, I'm gonna spend like $100 on this Leaf product
Yeah.
because they give
Something
me
that they're
something
willing to invest in. The
right.
the smaller brand that they're willing to invest in. And
Crazy
to
analogy, but the
yeah.
same
Well, no,
same
but to that
premise.
point, I think when the bigger brands start to emulate what's happening in the smaller arenas of that department, that's usually a sign that that smaller entity is
And I
growing and
and I
gaining
and I
momentum.
and I think that's what the Democratic Party was hoping for in 2016, where you saw Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren like
Right.
kind of start to emerge in that 2016, primary and even in 2020 with Bernie, but it never
It
caught wind.
never kind of caught wind. Yeah, and there was an opportunity. We've talked about that on the show before about 2016 being an opportunity for a different approach from the Democrats, essentially, or leaning a different way, and that independent candidates could have really appealed. I think at the end of the day, to a lot of what Americans wanted, even in that election, that weren't exactly excited about voting for Hillary, didn't like what Trump was bringing to the arena either. There was an opportunity there. But to that point, independents have remained relatively silent and out of the conversation over the last 8 years politically, whether Republicans have been in control or whether Democrats have been in control, which is kind of what independents do. They stay out of the way.
Right.
And so, as even as a registered independent myself, that is not a political party. Being an independent is not a political party. It is, more so in abstaining from loyalty of either of the other two parties, more so
Right.
than anything else. I even recognize that certainly as an independent. So there's little political sort of organization that happens around independent candidates within that same vein too. So they oftentimes are not the answer necessarily to the political organization that is necessary. But I do think that moving forward, having a bigger, more detailed conversation about what it means to be not loyal necessarily to traditional Republican and Democrat ideas is one that does gain momentum, over the next couple of years. It is something that we can certainly build from. How that builds, not sure yet, honestly.
But that's
Not
but
really
that's the
sure.
thing. It has to build. It has to build locally. It has to build on
Yeah.
the local school board, state. Like it has to start there before you can even think and have visions of maybe one day a third party candidate will be on the same debate stage with Democrat Republican and they're garnering like serious consideration. Like you have to start locally to make that change. And I think that's what somebody on the show last week mentioned Andrew Yang,
Yeah.
and he did an op-ed, talking about he started a third party, and here's why you shouldn't vote for one. It was posted in late October. It was on Newsweek, and pretty much he understood saying like I started a third party, which was the Forward Party, to reform the way we vote and provide more choices for independents, but he didn't push a presidential candidate because he knew what the ultimate outcome would be and what his going him or anybody else putting the presidential candidate would mean for the overall challenge. Instead, he thought that what his party and the Forward Party was going to do is that they're endorsing school boards, state representatives, city council, congressional candidates around the country, and he says the party will not be built on any one person during any one cycle. You need to be prepared to think and act long term. Yes, the country badly needs an upgrade from the dysfunction of our current political system, but it won't happen all at once. AKA, let's start at the lower ground and try to put people in place that want to make the change that we want to see, who
Mm-hmm.
stand for universal basic income, things like that. Like, let's start there at the school board, on city council, things like that, to try to push those initiatives and build that movement, and see what happens. To maybe it ain't going to happen in 3 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years. Like, but you have to
Mm-hmm.
start somewhere. You have to start
Yep.
on that ground level to reach the people to see what do they want, what are they trying to hear out, what are they trying to feel, and then go from there.
Yeah, this is organizing of a different level, and I thought that he brought up a lot of good points in the excerpt that we read from that op-ed from Andrew Yang, who has over the years had a lot of really good ideas for a lot of things, including just like handing Americans money, more money, which is one of my favorite Andrew Yang policies. Like, here's $2,000, a month or whatever his proposal was. Do with it what you must. We had several conversations around how interesting rather of a policy that would truly be.
Mm-hmm.
But to his point, organizing these ideas around the growth of a political party is difficult. It's tough. And it oftentimes, he had mentioned something else. It oftentimes does involve rallying around an individual and elevating an individual kind of to the top of the movement so that people can kind of simply believe in the individual. But he mentions, hey, look, no one person or the other necessarily needs to be that kind of person. We just need to have a group of people that believes in this kind of thing, so that we can get somewhere with this idea. Starting small, I think, is great in terms of that level at the local level. But to our earlier point of our conversation about media, Joe, I do think that an important a part of this whole thing is tapping into the right messaging,
Mm-hmm.
messaging. That's what it should all be about. I have constantly said that these people that oftentimes find themselves outside of the Republican Democrat label, they have a lot of really great ideas. We listened to a video clip from what is that? The Oliver character. I always want to call
Chase
him
Oliver. Yeah.
Chase Oliver. There you go. From Chase Oliver, where there are some interesting concepts and interesting things, in there, but he's still kind of clinging to the idea of being, very much so in a party. But I think if the messaging can reach the right group of people, which right now could be tens of millions of people that aren't committed to either party right now, I think they will be more successful at generating energy and momentum around people at least having this conversation. I think there are a lot of people also willing to have the conversation about voting for something that is not Democrat or Republican, either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so the opportunity remains open for that kind of thing, and hopefully people continue to get on that train. I don't think that mainstream media will necessarily be as apt to those kind of changes, though.
Yeah, no, it's something mainstream. No, because when is the last time you saw a third party candidate on TV? Really, given the time and day
You
that,
know what it's all about? It's all about donations. It's all about money. It's all about
yeah,
what can these media companies attach themselves to? There's not a whole lot of money in independent media. I mean, think about the independent media outlets that you know about right now. Maybe do very, very good work, like PBS, for example. I think does very, very good work. That's a publicly funded news service, right? But
right.
when was the last
There's
time that you saw that PBS was popping in the political arena, save for like hosting a major presidential debate or something like that, which is great. But when it comes to the political conversation, we oftentimes talk about the bigger media companies that seem a little bit more bought and paid for, like Fox or CNN or MSNBC. Like, where these people are leaning, where those advertising dollars go. But for the independent media outlets, not as popular, in that same vein.
no, and even some of them have their own biases towards certain individuals. I mean, we
Sure.
look at the Young Turks on the left side and how they've kind of made some interesting pivots. That's a whole nother story for a whole nother
Oh yeah, that's the
day.
whole
But
podcast. Yeah.
that's a whole podcast. But the idea of, like you said, like, you won't see a presidential debate on PBS, right? I mean, the third party presidential debate, which was the freedom and equality debate or something,
Yeah.
that happened with Jill Stein, Randall Terry, and Chase Oliver, that was on C-SPAN. C-SPAN is
C-SPAN, right? Another
C-SPAN is
one.
C-SPAN, right?
Yeah.
People
Another
aren't
independent
checking.
outlet.
Yeah, people aren't checking in to tune in to C-SPAN.
Mm-hmm.
They're not hearing that. Now, with that being said, do we think that that debate was put on CNN or MSNBC or something like that, would it change the minds of people? I don't know. Could
I guess
it?
we'll have to
It's,
see.
yeah,
We'll have to see. But I don't think anyone would watch it. I think just because it's
no,
simply
they
on one
wouldn't,
of these
because they
big
because
networks.
they would have been like, who are these people? We don't know these people. We don't know what they stand for. We don't know. And if you look at some of these guys' political websites, you're probably like, I see why you might not be.
You're on the fringe of the fringe, as we
You
said. You're
you
kind of a
might
nut.
not be on TV.
Yeah, you're kind of a nut. I think to wrap this up, and I appreciate everyone listening in live as well. This podcast is going to be made available after we are done as well, for your listening pleasure. This past week on Friday, unfortunately, we were subject Friday night to a very, very hyped event known as a boxing match. I guess is what they call this, or what they called this rather, on Friday night between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson. Two people that, in their own right, have garnered attention for reasons that go well beyond just the significance of this match. But Jovan, I did not watch it. I was working, but certainly heard about what happened and then saw the highlights and things like that. It was a very unentertaining fight. This is a very bad fight. This is a poor fight. It
wasn't really a fight. It was more so what's the best way to say it? A sparring match between the two.
A publicized sparring match, I suppose. Yeah. Now the thing about this was, as bad as the entertainment was, as bad as the product was, it ended up pulling in, what is it? It's like 60 million people or something like that ended up tuning into the stream. So that's a lot of people. It's a lot of people for this absolutely heinous and stupid event that happened here. Now, there was one possible outcome that would have made people chuckle and giggle all over the internet, but that didn't happen. It wasn't likely to happen anyway. So it ended up being this kind of dud of an event. But Netflix won, okay? Because they had all those people tune in or perhaps even buy subscriptions to this thing. Mike Tyson won. He got like, what, $20 million or something like that just to participate in this fight, win, lose, or draw. And then Jake Paul, of course, made a ton of money as the main promoter of this fight as a former YouTube star. I still am not really sure how he got to where he is right now. But, $40 million, these individuals won. The people who spent the money on either a Netflix subscription or buying one to tune into this fight, they lost.
Did not win. Yeah, they
lost.
Did not win. They lost.
The people lost. This was a terrible product. The next time Netflix is going to try and sell a fight, they're going to have this in the way, by the way, in their rearview mirror of like, yeah, we did this last time. Are we going to get 60 million to tune in again? Probably not.
I mean, right? The only thing that helps Netflix now is that they have the NFL on Christmas.
Yeah, they do. They have something to help people forget about this awful fight as a live event that they did. But the point being, the people lost here. They spent money and the people lost in this situation, but they still got 60 million. Netflix considers this a win. I know that because they got 60 million people to tune in. Okay, this most recent election, millions and millions and millions of people voted for a candidate that is going to consider this to be a political win for him. But it should be a reminder that there are big entities like Netflix, like Trump, like the Democrats, like the Republicans. These people can win and have the people still lose in many, many ways.
CNN.
Come on.
MSNBC.
Come on.
I mean, Morning Joe.
Morning Joe just taking L's this week. These big entities can still win while you, the people, lose. The media entities that we've talked about that have been less effective at capturing the hearts and the minds of the people are still making money because people are still tuned in.
And reacting and sharing. Like, that's always the thing that kind of not puzzles me, but probably boggles my mind, is that people will tune in and be like, oh my God, did you see what Scott Jennings said on CNN, on Abby Phillips' show? No, I didn't. Yeah. But the clip got shared. That's all that matters.
A clip got shared. If you watched it, if you watch a clip on the internet that is something heinous and horrendous, something that you don't support at all, guess what? It still counts as a view.
Like the guy saying "Wow, out of pockets" up the Mehdi Hassan about the beeper. Like,
yeah. Come on. Like, these are things that are heinous or whatever, but they get attention. And I think that whatever this next political movement is not party-based. This is just my belief. It's not party-based, but it does have to run on this stream of content that we have now where everyone is tuned in. It's not the mainstream media outlets that are determining and telling the story and telling people how to think anymore. This is an opportunity for another mindset here, not a third party mindset, not a third party rather, but a different mindset in how we approach these things that is not loyal to one party or the other. That's the conversation that we can continue to have as we move forward in these next couple of years. It's not about one candidate or the other. It's not about one party or the other.
No, it's not.
Absolutely
Like you said,
not.
it's about not creating, like you said, a third party, right? Or it's about, I guess, humanity and just movements, right? I think that's the
Yep.
next thing. What's going to be that next movement that spawns from this? Because we could say like the Republicans won, but it was because of a movement of MAGA is a movement, right? The Tea Party was a movement. Obama was a Democrat Party, but what was the movement he was pushing? Hope, change, right?
Right.
Democrats, for a certain extent, recently has now been a change of progressive, progressive, liberal, things that what we can do for what they can do as progressive movement within the Democratic parties. I think, like you said, it's not going to be an individual or a third party, Libertarians, Constitution Party, sorry. But it's going to be a movement. I think that's what's the next thing. It has to be a movement from the people.
Yep, has to be bred from the people. I think that that is very possible given the environment. I appreciate everyone for tuning in on the show. We'll wrap right there. Everyone for tuning in live, we appreciate you. You can catch the stream after we end the live stream right here. It'll be available on Spotify. Probably should have announced that a little bit earlier. We are available on Spotify. I'm actually going to put that up right now on the screen so folks can see it. We're available on Spotify at a Nicholsworth Pod, and I'll flash that up on the screen right here. Doing live editing, how about that? So people can find us on Spotify at a Nicholsworth Pod. Best place to go check out what's going on. Every single Monday at 8 o'clock, we are going to go live here and talk about issues like this, other things that we can do to get the people going. So I appreciate everyone for tuning in. Make sure you follow us and listen as well. Jovan, any parting messages before we go?
No, just everybody just keep on, supporting, keep watching, share the link, subscribe to the pod, just keep on supporting, and just for just people in general, just continue to stay knowledgeable, stay informed, do your research, watch everything, just stay informed.
Stay informed. Keep reading. We love to see it. We'll be back next Monday. Check the pod for other snippets and tidbits of content throughout the week as well. And we'll see you guys next Monday, 8 o'clock. Sharp. 8 o'clock.